I would tell you this as a mantra. Leadership is personal, it's focused. It's an outreach of one person to one other or to several. It's transmitted, if it goes through great distances, from group to group. So yes, in 42 years after that sort of unpromising start going across to Duntroon, I was the Chief of the Defence Force commanding 71,000 people. But the impact of any leadership that I was able to apply in a day-to-day sense was not to 71,000 people, although I hope that in some way some effect might be felt out there. It was indeed, though, to the service chiefs, the chiefs of the Navy, Army, the Air Force, to the senior operational staff, and even to the pollies and to my colleagues who were senior public servants. That group, which would fit nicely on several tables only in this room. Leadership in the forces isn't very much different to what the sort of leadership we need in business. Leadership is fundamentally a transactional human relations exercise. It's between a leader and the team, and there's a limit to how many people you can ever expect truly to lead. Very similar to small business, where you'll have the boss and then you'll have co-workers, but probably not very many. And they really need to be led if that business is to be superior and to be competitive. The question of whether leadership is innate or whether you can learn it is a really interesting one. I do believe that everybody has got some elements of leadership in them, and it's up to others to try to develop those. So I'm probably of the school which says you can actually take somebody who doesn't believe that they're a leader and show them that they're wrong and help them to be a leader. So we work hard on it.
What are the qualities of a good leader?
When you're talking about what qualities makes a good leader, the sorts of things that I always go to are those core qualities. They've got to be motivated to start with, they've got to want to do it. But then the core qualities of their integrity, their courage. They've got to have a bit of courage to be a leader, compassion and humility, and finally I think their innate sense of compassion. I really believe that leaders need to be fundamentally to show that how human they are, because they're not perfect.
No. How, and this issue of communication is obviously a big part of that. Being able to communicate on many levels, I guess, to many different people.
Look, the communication aspect of a leader's repertoire is hugely important. Now, I don't want to frighten potential leaders off by saying, well, you've got to be an arch communicator, but boy, does it help. So everybody can be helped and should work on their communication skills, because otherwise leadership uncommunicated is a bit like love unrequited. It doesn't transmit.
How can someone in small business transpose, I guess, those qualities? Is it something that comes across if that person just naturally has those qualities, or is it something that they have to work on?
A lot of people in small business won't realise that there is help available to them when they have to lead a group of co-workers to make the company competitive and successful. But there's help. And the sort of help is, of course, worthy books, courses you can do, but particularly look for a mentor, I'm saying. Find somebody who is a proven success in small business, whether they are part of your firm or somewhere nearby, and get them on your side to help you to develop as a leader. The sort of leaders which have worked in my circumstances would look to, obviously, a lot of military leaders that I've worked with in the past, hundreds of them. I wouldn't want to single them out, but there are people in society who everybody knows who are great leaders. I mean, there are some of our political leaders, there's Governors General like Sir William Dean, those sort of people who just are shining beacons. And you look at particular qualities they display at certain times. Who remembers Sir William after that terrible drowning tragedy in the Swiss Alps? And we saw him leading Australia's emotions on that occasion.
Yeah, he was extraordinary, wasn't he?
He was.
I remember that too.
Yeah.
He was fantastic. For you as a leader, what's been the toughest, and I'm talking about a personal thing now, I guess, in your capacity, the toughest thing as being a leader?
The toughest thing for a military leader was when you have to put your men and women into danger, and when sometimes that danger takes them and they are damaged. killed. I mean, the Sea King disaster is no doubt, in the last 20 years of my service, the most awful outcome, obviously for those poor people and for their loved ones, but for the whole Defence Force to have lost those magnificent young men and women. It's at times like those dreadful losses that leaders have to actually stand up and say, I'm responsible, I now have to do other things, I have to make sure it doesn't happen again, I have to find out what went wrong, I have to help to give condolences to the bereaved, I have to uplift the rest of the people who are their co-workers to get them back on the track. The leaders have to really knuckle down in times of great loss and tragedy.
There are so many people who lead in so many different spheres.
Yeah.
And none are really any more important than any other, are they? I mean, everything's kind of relative.
Yeah. Yeah.
And yet, you know, look at someone like you. Who would you look to for inspiration even now, I suppose? Who would you look to?
One of the keys to leadership is that there's no hierarchy of leaders. Everybody who's attempting to be a leader is undergoing the same sort of pressures and has the same requirements, whether it's the lady whose example in the tuck shop means that the other mums gather on that cold Saturday morning, or the bloke who's putting out the witches' hats for the game of footy and the other dads gather, or the leader of the country. They all have the same requirements to be personally admirable, to offer confidence and inspiration, to give a vision of what needs to be done, and to show by their own commitment that they take responsibility. If you do that, it doesn't matter where you are in that whole spectrum, you're a leader. A bloke came up to me and he said, hey, he said, my daughter bought your book. I thought, oh, good, yeah. And he said, but no, that's important. He said, the way it happened was, it was her birthday coming up, and I said, well, what do you want, dear? And she said, I'd like a book. Now, this woman hasn't written it. Yeah, she's got kids. She's 19. She's never written a book, read a book, not that I know of. And I was thrilled. And I said, what do you want, darling? And she said, I'd like to book my story. So he went to his wife. He said, hey, you know, our kid, you know, she wants a book. He wants the one by that general bloke, My Story. She wants to read about him and about, you know, current affairs and big things in Australia's recent international relations. Fantastic. So he buys the book, wraps it up, gives it to her on her birthday. She opens it up and her face drops a bit. And he said, what's the problem? I got you the book. She said, yeah, I wanted the one by Chappelle Corby.